Samach Zayin, and we got onto Kuf Samach Zayin Amud Aleph, but I didn't have clarity in the last line that we learned, which was the first line at the top of Kuf Samach Zayin Amud Aleph. So I'm going to go back to 5 lines from the bottom of Kuf Samach Vav Amud Beis. Hahu d'hava kosav bei shis meya v'zuzah. It said, I owe Reuven or Shimon 601 zuz, but it didn't say 600 of what was owed. 600 units and a zuz. So Sholcha Rab Shravya Kameda Abaye, the following question: does it mean shish meya isteri v'zuzah, 600 isteri and a zuz, which a isteri is, I believe, 2 zuzin, or dilma shis meya priti v'zuzi, or is it 600 prutais and a zuz? And the pruta is worth much less than a zuz. So Abai said, dal priti, it for sure does not mean prutas. The lakasim b'shtari dasuchem iskanahu. No one's going to write in a shtar, Reuven or Shimon, 650 pennies. People would write $6.50. So therefore, no one's going to write 600 prutos. And what he'll do is he'll change it into zuzin and write $6. So then now, what are our options? My orbit shismeya isteri v'zuzah. What might it be? Might it mean 600 isteri on the zuz, which is more? Zok to Gemara yad bal shtar ala tachtoina. What we're going to say is it doesn't mean a denomination that's more than a zuz, rather it would mean a denomination that could be a zuz or less. Amar Abaye, Haiman the boy lemechuye or lemechve chasimis yodei. What does Arshkel say? Lemechve or lemechuye? Lemechve. He wants to create a sample of his handwriting. You know, when you open up a bank account, you have to give them a signature card. So somebody wanted to give a signature card bevedina to the Besdin. Why would someone want to do that? Zokt the Heilige Rashbam, very simple. What happens if Reuven and Shimon sign the shtar? Thank you so much. What if Reuven and Shimon sign the shtar? And now that shtar needs kiyum. But unfortunately, Shimon is no longer around to be able to do the kiyum. So Reuven is going to come with another aid and testify about Shimon's signature that it was authentic. At this point, who's going to authenticate Reuven's signature? Normally, an aide can authenticate his own signature, but at this point, Reuven could not authenticate his own signature, because then if you look at the validity of the shtar, it's relying 75% on Reuven, because he's them on 100% for his signature, and he's them on 50%. He's one of the 2 eidim that are being Mekayim Shimon's signature. That we don't allow. So therefore, what Reuven wanted to do is, I will say edus with somebody else about Shimon's signature. My signature I won't testify about, but I'll create a sample of my handwriting, and then Besdin will independently Mekayim his signature, because one of the methods of kiyum is if they have a sample of my handwriting, they can compare it without even having edim at all. Today the coffee is even more geschmack because I walked here. Don't worry, I didn't walk here for exercise, Martin. I gave my car to put on snow tires. Okay, so talk to Gemara. What he should do is loy lachvi b'soif megilta. If you're going to give Bezin a paper with your signature, don't put your signature at the bottom of the paper. Why? Because maybe a scoundrel will find it. And then he'll use it like a blank check, the chosiv, the masach bezuze, and he'll write that you owe him money. So this is a very, very loaded sugya. So the first issue that we have to work through on this sugya is a Gemara in Ksubas. The Gemara in Ksubas says, if you have to give a sample of your handwriting, never ever do it on a paper. Only do it on a chaspa. A chaspa is a shard that is very easy to erase and rewrite things on a chaspa, and therefore no shtar is ever accepted on the chaspa. So if you write your signature on the chaspa, it's fail-safe. So Tosfos asks, if they're not always trying to ask in Subas, why is it that here we do allow you to write on paper? So Tosfos' approach is very simple. there's two different ways to safeguard yourself. Either do it on a chaspa, or do it on a piece of paper, but do it all the way at the top. That's what Tosha says. Other Rishonim learn, I think the Ramban says, it's a lechatchila and b'diavad. Lechatchila, the best place to sign your name is on a place where it's fail-safe. They cannot forge, which will be on the chaspa. If you did it on the paper and you did it all the way to the top, you'll be safe. But it's not worth doing that, because what if you do it by mistake once and you sign lower down? You can potentially create for yourself a problem. And the Tumim has a hybrid shot, and the Tumim says, our Gemara is speaking where somebody on his own decided that he wanted to help be Mekayim the Shtar that he signed upon, so he's giving an example. There, do it any way you want, just protect yourself. But in the case of Ksubis, the Bezdin was requiring somebody to submit a signature. When Bezdin do things, they have to do things in a manner that's fail-safe. So that's how the Tumim looks at it. But there's another very interesting shaila about this. In order for you to be Mekayim somebody's chasima, do you have to see a similar signature? What if you just see their handwriting? Would that be good enough? Do you have to see their signature, or do you have to see any handwriting? You can compare. They can write any chain of letters, anything that they wrote, and compare that way. So there's actually a machalekes rishonim. That is the svar. So that is the sheet that the Ritva says writing is writing, so you can compare it. But someone argues on Ritva, I don't remember who, and he says people sign their names differently than they write. When you write more legible. When you sign, you make something a little squiggly, this and that, right? So that's why the other Rishon holds that it wouldn't be enough just to do a handwriting comparison. It actually has to be your signature. The next shaila is another very interesting shaila. This was a shaila that came to the Lavush. Someone had a signature card that somebody had, exactly what you're not supposed to do. Someone had a signature where someone signed at the bottom. And he went to Bezdin and he said, Ruvain, who's the signatory on this piece of paper, owes me $500. And I'll prove it to you. Migui, he gave me this blank piece of paper. I didn't fill it in, but he gave me a blank piece of paper. So believe me when I say that Reuben owes me $500 because I have this blank piece of paper that I could have filled in. Would that be a good migui? So the Lavush says, do we like that shaila? The Lavush says it would absolutely not be a good migui. Why? Because it's a normal thing. It's a normal thing for people to do that, to write blank papers and keep it in their pocket if they're going to be seeking a loan, so that they could react very quickly if they find somebody willing to give them a loan. But it's very, very unlikely that someone would ever hand somebody else what we would call a blank check. So therefore, the chazaka, or the migui that he has, is a migui garua, because it's very unlikely that what he said actually happened, that someone gave him a blank check. It's very likely that this fell from the loiva, and he had it prepared for himself. And therefore, we will not rely on the migui. Although the Smak vehemently argues on the Lavush, and in the Sefer on Choshen Mishpat that the Lavush wrote is called Ir Shushan, and he writes, why am I calling my Sefer Ir Shushan? Because a city has to have a proper system of law and order. So that's why he used Ir Shushan in his series of Sorim for Choshen Mishpat. But I'll call upon him, the Smak says absolutely not. It's a very good migui. It's a perfect migui. And the Lavush brings a raya that it's not a good migui. He brings a raya from our sugya. Because why does our Gemara say, don't sign at the bottom of the paper, because somebody might fill it in? The Gemara said better, a guy doesn't even have to fill it in, he'll come with a migui. He'll be able to collect with this star without anything written on it. He has a migui. Elamai zok Lavush, the migui is not a good migui. Zok the Smak, that's not a raya, because the normal thing is for a guy to fill it in. The migui is I could have filled it in. So when the Gemara is talking about the main danger is someone's going to fill it in. But I'll call upon them halacha l'maisa. It depends on the metzius. Nowadays, most poskim hold it is normal to give a blank check. Right? Sometimes you're buying something, you don't know exactly how much it's going to cost, so you'll leave your vendor a blank check, someone, of course, whom you trust, or a moisid, right? It's not such an unusual thing that people give a blank check. So really, whether or not it's a migui garua or a good migui would really depend on the metzius of what is the norm for people to do. That was an interesting twist on it. The last very interesting shaila on this sugya is someone pulls out such a shtar, an IOU note signed by the loiva himself. So you can't deny it because it's an IOU note. But can you say paraiti? So normally, if you borrow money and it's a milva b'shtar, you're not supposed to return the money until you receive the shtar back, because there's the time of shtarcha b'yadi my boy. The Mabul will say, you can't claim that you paid it. If you paid it, why am I holding the shtar? You would never have given me the bounty back had I not returned the shtar. Is there a taina of shtarcha b'yadi my boy on the IOU? Or maybe by IOU, you don't have such a raya. So that's actually a big machlokes rishonim at the end of our Masechta between, on one side, it's like titans over here. On one side, you have the Rambam and the Rif, and on the other side, you have the Balamor. The Rambam and the Rif says you would not be believed to say, you would be believed to say paraiti, even though it's a shtar, but it's like a quasi-shtar, it's not a real shtar, and therefore, I wouldn't have to demand it back if I pay you. And therefore, if I say paraiti, I would be Naman. Because it's not really a shtar with Adim, it's like an IOU note. It's not a real shtar, it's an IOU note. And the Balamor says, what are you talking about? Avada, you could say shtar chabiyadi, my boy. And once again, the ayah that not like the Rif, and not like the Rambam, and you can't say shtar chabiyadi, my boy. Because if you could, I'm sorry, that you can't say, that you cannot say shtar chabiyadi, my boy. Because if you could, why is the Gemara making such a big deal over not handing over a paper with your name on it? Even if the guy wants to forge it, you'll say paraiti. So what's the danger to you? So it's a raya that you can't say paraiti, because you could say paraiti, it wouldn't be a big deal. That's what the Balamor says. But the Rif and the Rambam, or the Mechamas who normally defends the Rif and the Rambam, the Mechamas says that's not a raya, because if someone takes you to best and mungs you with a fake star, your first instinct is going to say lahadam, and it's a forged star. You're not going to say paraiti. You're not going to think of that. Once you say lahadam, you're no longer an eman to say paraiti. So therefore, the Gemara is saying good. You shouldn't allow such a chesima, because not everyone's going to be so conniving to chap right away to know what the taina to neutralize the star. Because the Gemara weiter. With Tanan we learned, if you pull out an IOU note where someone signs that he owes you money, it's mechayiv somebody, it's neman as to collect from nechasim necharim. It's not a star with Adam and a coil, so you wouldn't be able to collect from the kuchois, but you could definitely collect from the chasim b'necharim. So to Gemara, that's not a raya. Period. I'm sorry. Ahu bezvina the asa lekamei the abaye. There was a bezvina. A bezvina is a someone who everybody loves, because whenever he comes, he's giving out money. He's a tax collector. So everybody loves to see him. I'm so happy to see you today. How much do I owe you? And it seems like the Gemara didn't look kindly upon those people. They were always perceived as crooks, as we'll see in the story. Omer Lei. So he told Abaye, the chutzpah, he told him to Abaye, Nechsel limar chasimis yadei. I'd like you to sign for me this piece of paper. I want to get a signature card from you. Why? Because I give a discount on taxes to Talmidei Chachamim. So whoever will bring from you a certification that he's a Talmid Chacham, he will get a break. It's like everybody knows that if you learn in Lakewood, you get 50% off the Verrazano Bridge. Not. Right? So who had in there was some type of deal that if you were in yeshiva, you got a discount. But I need to make sure that people are going to forge these certificates. I want to make sure that it's legit, so I want to be able to have a copy of your chesima. The Chiyas Rabbanon machvuli, when the Rabbanon will show me your signature, ma'avarna luhu b'loy mechsa. I will give him a tax vacation. I'll temporarily relieve them from the GST. So achvelei bereish megilta. So of course Abaye was no fool. Abaye is signing right at the top of the page, so there's no danger where a crook could put something in front of it. But this Chayirua have a kanogabay. As Abaye is about to sign, he's like yanking on the top of the paper to try to force Abaye not to sign on the first line, but to sign maybe a half inch or an inch down. Abaye saw right through that. Amar le kvar kadmucha rabbanon. The Rabbanon already think of crooks like you. And they told us to sign dafka on the top of the page because you're not coming here to be so benevolent and to give Talmidei Chachamim a break. You're trying to rip me off. Okay, Gavalti. It's very funny because in the last couple of letters, Abaye Mamish came here with a vengeance. He's weighing in on all of these Hilchas Shtaris. Omer Abaye, there's certain letters, there's certain words that you should never write at the end of a line in a shtar. And those letters are mitlas from 3, bar eser, leilichtoi b'soishit. Why? Because how do you convert tlas, which is 3, into tlasin, which is 13? All you need to do is add a yud and a nun, right? So therefore, you shouldn't write those words at the end of the line, Dilma Mezayif Ekosov, because it's not hard to add a yud and a nun at the end of a line. And therefore, you're putting yourself in grave danger if you do that at the end of the line on a shtar. The East Ramale, what if you had no choice? You don't have a word processor, and that's how it ended up. So what are you supposed to do now? Zok to Gemara, very simple. Nahadre Lidabure, train Klosa Zimni. Make sure to rewrite a couple of times in the Nusach HaShtar the real amount that you are being mechayiv yourself with this shtar. Eventually, it's going to work out that the number is going to be in the middle of the line. And the number in the middle of the line later on in the shtar is going to trump whatever it said earlier, as we already said earlier in the Gemara. And therefore, even if it says several times tlosin, but if at the end it says tlas, then that'll be good. So basically, you make the server continue writing the same thing over and over again until it lines up to be in the middle of the line. You see how word processors make things so much easier. So let's first talk about what assets this fellow had. This fellow had a huge piece of property, and in this huge piece of property, there was also an orchard. And he wrote, I'm selling you tilta bipardisa. I'm selling you a third of my pardes. So that means out of 100 acres, I have a 10-acre pardes. What I'm giving you is 3 1/3 acres of pardes. That's what he meant to give. But the recipient of the shtar was a crook. Also, mokhe legagi the base v'karei. You can easily convert the base of bipardisa into a vav by chopping off most of the roof and chopping off the full base. Now, instead of reading tilsa bipardisa, it's tilsa upardisa. That means I'm buying a third of the entire property, and in addition to the property, to a third of the property, I'm buying the full pardes. What a difference it makes between a vav and a base. V'shava upardisa. And then also the kamei de Abaye, he came to Abaye to adjudicate this machlokes. My shtar says I'm entitled to a third of the entire property, and on top of that, the entire pardes. Amalei, Abaye said, look at this text. Something is funny here about this text. My time reviach le'alma l'hai vav. Why is there so much space between the vav and the pay of upardisa? Something doesn't make sense. Hafte, they forced him, and he was moide. So there's a big discussion in the Rishonim. What does it mean, kafte? Does it mean they beat him up? Is that how our Batei Dinim work? That if they want to, I'm sorry, make a chas, is that how it works? So you find Adam Dadin al Nafshe, but this is in Bezdin. Well, Bezdin is what they had. They had a waterboarding station in the Bezdin to induce people to say the truth. So there's actually a big machlokes about it. There are those who hold that in certain instances Bezdin's allowed to do that, but there are those who should have learned that they didn't hit him. They tied him up on the post, and the guy with the whip says, "Okay, you ready?" And that's all he says. That's all he did. And they said, "No, okay, I'll say the truth." But they wouldn't actually hit him. They just scared him into it. Menas, Ruvain, Vishimon. So there were 3 brothers. Their names were Ruvain, Shimon, and the last brother's name was Achi. And they each shared a property. So they each owned a third of the property. The shtar said, we are selling the portion of Reuven and Shimon. Achi, the brothers, not referring to their brother. It just means Reuven and Shimon, who are brothers, they're selling their portion to Chaim Yam. So that because the bay Manas Reuven v'Shimon Achi. Havaluhu Acha the Shmei Achi. It turns out that Reuven and Shimon happened to have had a brother whose name was Achi as well. Azal Kasev Beivov. So what he did is he added in a little vav in front of the Achi. So now it reads I'm buying the portion of Reuven, Shimon, and Achi. So he's getting everything. V'shavya v'achi. And again, also l'kamed Abaye. Abaye said, my time adochik le'alma l'hai vov. Why is this vov so squished in over there? It doesn't look like it belongs. Again, kaf say v'idi. So it seems like Abaye was a document expert. Yeah, these are stories that happened. So this is not a tiny Rabbi Rabbi asked a what if Shiloh. These actually did happen. We're talking more about Hushtara, the Bechosim Alei, Rava, Virav Ado, Bar Ado. Who were the two Adim, the signatories on this Shtar? Rava and Rav Ada Bar Ado. Oh, I love this one. I love this one. There's a story about a fellow who's sitting in the waiting room at his doctor, and a friend walks in and he's also sitting in the waiting room. So he asks his friend, and he stuttered terribly. Your uncle, for what's supposed to do but the doctor, what did you come for? So Yank says, we're here by a doctor, it's a little bit personal, if you don't mind. You'll go for your issue, and I'm going to go for my issue. But this guy was a nudnik. So this guy says, your uncle, tell me, why are you here? And he says, all due respect, I think it's a little inappropriate, to ask me this question. But the guy's bugging him. So finally, this Yankel got frustrated because this guy's mom is nudniking him and says, you want to know why I'm here? I'll tell you why I'm here. Because I pitch the way you speak. So let's have a look at this case. So the Gemara. Rava, also la kamei de Rava. I'm sorry, Hushtara, the Avachosim Malay, Rava, Rav Ada Barabba. Also la kamei de Rava. The Shtar came to Rava. Rava was lucky that the Shtar that he himself signed upon was brought to him to adjudicate on its validity. Amr Lay, Rava looked at his signature and he said, Dain Chasimis Yada Didi. This is definitely my signature. This is exactly how I sign my name. But there's one major problem with this Shtar. Miu Kameder of Acha Barada Loy Chasimi Limoy. I would never ever have signed the Shtar on top of Rav Acha Barada. I would have only signed below him. He was a great man. So there has to be a forgery. Because even though it's a perfect forgery, there's no way I would have signed it. That's like signing a COVID vaccine certificate for April 31st, like as we discussed on Shabbos. There's no way I could have signed it. You know that story. There's a person in Toronto who his 10 children, or there was many children were coming in for like a Shabbos, to have a Shabbos together with their parents during COVID. And they all had forged vaccine certificates, but the date on the vaccine certificate was April 31st.
No, the last kid.
Oh, only the last kid?
Only the last kid.
So the customs hopped right away. He's not April 31st. So that's what happened over here. Rava said there's no way I would have ever signed before Rav Acha Bar Ada. So therefore, once again, they forced him to admit that it was a forgery. And then Rava was pretty amazed at the skill and the quality of the forgery. Okay, I understand how you were able to duplicate my signature. It's doable. How could you possibly have forged your signature so well? The Rosh Yodei, his hand shook, so his signature was all shooken up. It's much harder to duplicate that. How did you do that? How did you do that? Omar. So I guess now already the forgery, he got flattered by the quality of his forgery, so he shared his methods. So he said, Omar, Anchi Yadoi Amitra. You know what I did? They had these string bridges that people would walk over the river on. So if you're standing on the bridge and people are walking over, the bridge is shaking the whole time. So we signed this Shtar, we forged this Shtar on the bridge. So the natural vibration of the bridge duplicated the shaking of Rav Acha's hands when he would have signed. Kum Azarnuka v'kosav. We wrote it on an Azarnuka. Rashbam says an Azarnuka is shaboy doilin maim nabor. It sounds like he was hanging off a pail that they lower into a bar. And as you're hanging off this pail, so the pail is moving, and it's that movement that helped them duplicate Rav Acha's signature. So if you ever wanted to get into the forgery business, get yourself a well, or a bridge, or just get a job. Zok Telige Mishnah. Koisvin get leish afal pi shein ishtaim. A husband who wants to write a get for his wife can write the get, even though his wife is not there, even though she doesn't know about it. He doesn't need her agreement to write the get, because he can give her a get even balkar. What if a woman knows she's getting divorced and therefore she's going to be receiving payment of her ksuba? So she prepares a receipt to approve that she received her moist ksuba that will be held by the husband, so that she will no longer be able to try to make a second collection attempt of her ksuba. Uvilvad sheyehei makirin, but they have to be makir, which the Gemara will explain. What do they have to know? And it's the Edom have to know. What do the Edom have to know in order to be able to sign such a shtar? Who pays both for the shover as well as for the get? Babal noisen schar. You know who pays? The husband pays. And the Rishbam says it's before it's Gemara, but the get is he's giving, and the shover is also, he writes, because it's to his benefit. The shover is to his benefit because it will protect him from having to pay a second time. Zok the Mishnah weiter. Koisvin shtar leloiva. Alpha b'shein malva imoy. What if a loiva wants to prepare a shtar so that if he finds someone to lend him money, he's prepared right away to do it on the spot? You're allowed to do that. However, the ein koisvin lemalva, but you will not write a shtar for a malva ad shehei loiva imoy, until the loiva is there. And we had this Gemara before. Tosfos speaks out. Memela the loiva. We allow the loiva to write a shtar, but what's not fair is if he writes on the shtar January 1st, 2024, and he really only did the loan on February 1st, 2024, you know who's losing? The Lekuchas are losing, because any properties that he sold in January will be liable to collection, because it says that on the shtar, when really the loan didn't happen until February. So Tosfos tells us, or Tosfos actually reminds us, that we learned this in Bava Metzia, and the Gemara says there's two eitzes. Either it's a shtar knaisa, where in the shtar it writes, I am being mishabed my property to you even before you lend me the money. So the shibud, in fact, happened on January, even before the money was lent, and that, Tosfos there said, creates a coil. So the life of potential buyers already know that this guy's planning to borrow money, and therefore they can take the necessary precautions. That's one shot. And Abai said, Eidov b'chisum of zachaloi. It's automatic. Anytime Edim sign on the shtar halva, whether the halva occurred or not, that will create the shibud automatically because of the fact that there was a shtar written. So therefore, there's no unjust peril exposure to potential buyers. But ve'en kosin l'malva ache loy ve'imoy. They will not write a blank shtar for a malva unless there's a loiva there. Who pays for the shtar? Halva ba'loiva noisen schar, because of course the purpose of the shtar is to help a loiva get a loan. Kosin shtar lemoicher alpha b'shen lekech imoy. Again, if you want to sell a property, you can have a shtar pre-written. Then kosin lekech achi moicher imoy. Who pays for lekech noisen schar, because he benefits from the shtar. It's proof that he in fact purchased the property. Ein kosin shtar erishin u'nesuin. What are erishin v'nisuin? The Rashbam says that erishin is the tnoim. So when they make up that we're doing a shidduch, and the chassan side is going to give X dollars, and the kala side is going to give X dollars, that's what shtar erishin. Shtar nisuin, the Rashbam says, is the ksuba. Elamidash name, unless they're both in agreement. Who pays for it? The chassan pays for it. Ein kosten shtar arisus v'kablonus. Arisus and kablonus are when a farmer is making a deal with a landowner that he will farm the land, and he will either get a percentage of the produce, or he will pay a specific amount of rent in produce for the property, but if he makes more, he benefits from it. So those types of arrangements are only done elamidash neim. Again, both parties have to be aware of it in order for such a shtar to be written. Who pays for it? Vamakabel noisen schar. And the oris, or the kablan, he pays because he's the one who needs the landowner to make that deal with him. Ein koisvin shtare birurin v'chol ma'aseh bezdin. You don't write shtare birurin, which the Gemara will explain what those mean. V'chol ma'aseh bezdin, or any ma'aseh bezdin, ella midash neim, unless both parties are there and maskim to the shtar. Ushneim noisen schar. In this case, both parties are beneficial. We'll see what it means in the Gemara, and therefore they both are equally liable to pay. You write two shtaris, two duplicate shtaris, to give one to each side. For two people, you will duplicate these story Beruin, and you will give one to each one. Each of the parties to this discussion will get a cup. It says that you cannot write a get for somebody unless the Edom are makir. Makir what? Shem ha'ish beget, v'shem ha'isha b'shoy. The name of the man doing the gerushin, his name has to be in the get, and the Edom have to know who it is that they're signing the get for, and the same thing for the name of the isha in the shoy. Yosy Rab Safra, Rab Acha bar Huna, Rab Huna bar Chinina. So these three titans of Torah were sitting down. The Yosef Abaye Gabayu, and Abaye was there. Whenever there's a question of a shtar, Abaye always shows up. The Yasvi v'kamei boiler, and they were clearing what exactly is required for this pre-written get or this pre-written shaver. Shema ish beget in, Shema ish aloi, and the opposite. Shema isha b'shaver in, Shema ish loi. But there's a real problem because v'leichish dilma kasav gita. What stops him from writing a get? V'azil umam telei le'itze deheich. He could write a get, and let's say the get is written by the man Yaakov ben Shlomo. He can go to some other Yaakov ben Shlomo's wife and give her the get. And in fact, it's a apostolic get because it would not have been written lishma. And let's look at the Bach in Aleph. Umegarishla, and he'll give her a get. This is a very controversial word, umegarishla, because the Rashbam says even if you're not choishish that there'll be a problem with the get, the problem is now she'll be able to use this get to collect Mois Ksuba. So there's a tremendous peril by not having the name of the wife written down, because this way a get, all you need to do is find a man with the same name, even though his wife has a different name, and they'll be able to use that get. Or on the flip side, with the shover, v'zimnin ozla kasva isha shover, v'yahava legavra the lav delay. She'll give it to a man who happens to have a wife with the same name as her, but his name could be totally different, and he'll be able to use it as a shover. Amaluha Abaye, Zokta Abaye, Hachi Amarav, Shema Ish beget, v'hu adin l'shema isha, Shema Isha b'shover, v'hu adin l'shema ish. Of course, you need both their names in the get. The reason why he talks about Shema Ish beget, because the Ish is writing the get. The reason why he says Shema Isha in the shover, because she's writing it. But Avada, you need both because of this potential peril. Frag the Gemara of Alechos, L'shnei Yosef and Shimon Tadorim be'ir achas. Why aren't we worried that there are two Yosef and Shimons in this city? Dilma Kasav Gita. Maybe he'll write a get. The Ozil, and he'll bring it umam telei le'itzedahech, and he'll give it to a different wife. I'm assuming only if they would have the same name. So Zok to Rashbam v'neichash dilma nof. Oh, that's weiter. That's weiter. So Zok to Gemara, Amalu Reb Acha bar Huna Hachi Amarav. This is the rule. First of all, it's very unlikely to have two Yosef or Shimon in one city, and if that did happen, we would know about it. So therefore, Hachi Amarav Shnei Yosef and Shimon Hador and Be'ir Achas. If in fact there are two people in a city with the same name, then Bezdin will not allow a divorce to happen unless both couples are there and it's crystal clear which couple is getting the divorce. Shnei Yosef and Shimon Hador and Be'ir Achas Ein Megashin is Shasein Elazeh B'fnei Zeh. We will not allow a get to happen unless they are both couples are there. Let's see the Rashbam. Elazeh B'fnei Zeh the Lecha Lemechish Su Lamidi, and this makes it foolproof because both parties are there, so it's clear which party got the vote. In fact, but there's still a problem because what happens if there was a guy? The only time we mandate that the two couples have to be there is if we know that there are two Yosef and Shimons in the city, right? But what if there wasn't? If there wasn't two Yosef and Shimon in the city, there was only one Yosef and Shimon in the city, then Yosef and Shimon would be able to divorce his wife without anybody around, like anybody else. So what are you going to do if Reuven ben Yaakov decides that he's going to make a scam? Reuven ben Yaakov will go to a different city, and in the different city, he will introduce himself as Yosef ben Shimon. umachzik le l'shmei b'Yosef ben Shimon, and he will introduce himself as Yosef ben Shimon, and there in that city he will be known as Yosef ben Shimon, and in that city, the Chos of Gita, he will write a get under the name Yosef ben Shimon, umam tilei, and then he'll give it in the city that he goes back home to. He'll give it to the wife of the other Yosef ben Shimon. No one's going to be choshesh anything because no one ever knew that there were two Yosef ben Shimons in the city. So it's all fake. So why aren't we concerned about that? I'm sorry. Why would he do that? Yeah. There's a lot of, you have to ask Rabbi Yirmiyah why he would do that. The Gemara suggests a lot of issues where people do those things, but maybe it's because he wants his wife. That's a very obvious reason. I'm sorry, but maybe she's an abused woman and she's an aguna, and it happens to be his sister. Right? I mean, there's a million reasons why somebody would want to do this. Amar lahu. So Amar lahu Rav Huna bar China Haki Amar Rav. This is what Rav said. Kol shehuchsuk shmoi be'ir shloishim yoim ein choshishin loy. Unless it occurred, unless he's there for 30 days, it wouldn't work. So therefore, the kol kach lohaya machlev shmoi zman meruba pen yivad adavar. He might go to a different city and say, this is my name, and then get someone to write him a get. But to stay there for 30 days under this false name, he's not going to go through that. So we're not choshish that someone's going to do something so crazy. And therefore, it's not a concern. Why aren't we concerned? People are crazy, but not that crazy, I guess. Lo yischazek mai. Is there any way to expedite being able to use this new name? Rabbi, yes. The Kari Le Vani. You know what you could do? Let's say he wants to call himself Yosef ben Shimon. His name is not Yosef ben Shimon. When he's walking the street and that call Yosef ben Shimon, if he instinctively turns around, then maybe he is Yosef ben Shimon. When the Soviet Union was still closed and you couldn't do anything with Yiddishkeit there, a lot of people went to the Soviet Union clandestinely to spread Yiddishkeit, and they would smuggle in tefillin, and they were at great risk to themselves. So one of the people who used to go regularly to Russia was Rabbi Heinemann. And this was in the 80s, in the early 80s, because his son Baruch Heinemann was in my class. Baruch Heinemann used to be Eidim by Haki Handler, right? So he was in my class. So he would tell me that when they prepped his father to go to Russia, they would spontaneously walk up behind him in America and say, Rabbi. And if he would turn around, he couldn't go. He had to be programmed that he would not instinctively react to the name Rabbi, because in Russia they did that to him many times. And if he would have turned around right away, they would have been choshing him that he's there to make Yid, to make Bala Tshuva. So he had to go, he went completely as a tourist, and he had to totally show no sign of anything to do with religion. So that's exactly what this test is. Amar by the Kar Levani, if you call him and he instinctively turns around, maybe that would be a good raya. That's not a good test, because somebody wants to be a crook, he'll prepare just like Rabbi Heinemann did, so that he shouldn't get caught in a trap like that. This also opens up a huge sugya, but I first want to get onto Amar Aleph, and then I want to discuss, because it opens up a huge sugya about how long does it take for a name change to take effect. The Gemara says over here that it's 30 days, but we'll get to there in a second. Who Tavra? There was this receipt that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba signed upon. Also lakamei hahi itza, and the lady who this shaver was written from, in other words, this lady had written a receipt signed by Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba that she had already received her ksuba. Now she's collecting her ksuba, and the husband pulls this shaver and says, "I paid you already." And the lady said, "Amrle lavanavo, it was not me. This is a Shtar, it says my name, but I'm telling you, I never got the ksuba money. This has got to be a forge." Omar. So Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba said, who was one of the signatories, Omar anon nami amri lahu lav ihi. I told the Edim that this is not the same woman. This is not the same woman. Well, Amrli, and they told me, Rabbi, this is the same woman. She sounds different because she got older and her voice changed. Mekishu the kashala. She merely got older. Uboger lokala, and therefore her voice changed. And you are thinking this is not the same woman, but avada it is. So in fact, it's mevat. In fact, his signature is good, which is a little bit of an interesting situation because at first Rabbi Yirmiyah Abba disqualified his signature. Now he's saying it is my signature. So why isn't there a problem of kivin shehikid? He's already invalidated his signature and admitted that maybe this is not the same woman. Amar Abaye, Afal Gab Amar Rabbanan. Even though the Rabbanan say kivin shehikid shuvay nechayzu magid, Rabbi Yirmiyah's validation of Shtar, Rabbi Yirmiyah's invalidation of Shtar was never valid in the first place. You know why? Tzuvim Rabbanan does not focus on the features and the characteristics of women. So he would be fuzzy. And since he would be fuzzy, it's not really a retraction in the first place, because he's not a mumche in women, so therefore it's not expected of him to know, and therefore his chasima will still be good. On the flip side, Hahu Tavra there was another similar type of situation, but in the opposite circumstance. Omer Lei, she told him again, Lava no havoy, I'm not the one. Omer Lei, he told her, Ivra Antava was you. So now your question is, we just established Rabbi Yirmiyah doesn't know women so well, so how could he be so sure that it was her? Tzurva doesn't look. Amar Abaye, Avagav the Tzurva Merabonin Lav Urchel Medik Kivin the Duk. It doesn't mean he'll never know. It means you can't say his chasima is possible when at first he thought it was somebody else, but if he's sure he did check. So it works both ways. The Tzurva Merabonin can work both ways. So there's a big discussion that the Magidei Sheir on Aldaf talk about this 30-day thing. And they got into a big discussion of people are makbid that if the father-in-law has the same name as the son-in-law, they won't do the shidduch. So I won't marry a girl whose father's name is Yosef. Okay, good. And vice versa with her daughter-in-law and the mother-in-law. So it's brought down in the tzavah of Rabbi Yehuda Chassid that you should be makbid on it. So the Chassam Sofer wrote an interesting shul. The Chassam Sofer was Bechlal not makbid on these things. The Chassam Sofer, whose name was Moshe, happened to have had a son-in-law by the name of Moshe. And the Chassam Sofer writes, I think he was asked the Shaila, he says, you shouldn't need to worry about the things because the thing that Rabbi Yehuda Chassid wrote he was a Karishan. I think he was early Achron, late Rishon. The things that he wrote in his proper sefer of Sefer Chassidim, that you have to be makbid on. But the things that he only wrote in this Tavah, you don't have to be makbid on, because those were only for his family. And Adrabah, it's usher for someone to write that something's usher if it's mafurish in the Gemara that it's mutter. And there's many cases in the Gemara where somebody married a girl whose father had the same name as him. So it's you can't do that. And the Bava Rabbi Yehuda Chassid would have done that. But Vice he saw Baruch HaKodesh that those shidduchim weren't the intended shidduchim for him, so he put it in his tavah for his own children. But about you don't have to be makbid. So the Chassam Sofer writes, for those people who are afraid, be afraid. But if you're not afraid, there's no reason to be concerned about it at all. And then the Noid Yehuda writes even nicer. The Noid Yehuda says, I get shilas all the time from people. I want to do a shidduch with Moshe, but it's the same name. I don't know what to do. It's the whole bizach. He says it's funny that everyone's so busy with the Sefer Chassidim, but the Gemara says you're supposed to marry your daughter off to a Talmud Chacham, and you're supposed to marry your son off to a Bas Talmud Chacham. No one ever came over to me and asked me a shaila. This boy is very rich. I want it for my daughter, but he's not a Talmud Chacham, and the Gemara says I have to marry a Talmud Chacham. So how come nobody's worried about the Gemara? Everybody's so busy with their Yehuda Chassid, and nobody gives two hoots about the Gemara. What a corrupt world we live in. That's what the Noid Yehuda writes. Shmuel likes that.
Jeder verheftigt de eigen.
So that's what not you this. So I'll call upon him. What happened is the funny enough, when the Chassam Sofer took his son-in-law Moshe, he had him add a name Moshe Tuvia. He had him add the name Tuvia. So he and then there's a discussion of what if the children don't care, but the mother-in-law's makbid. Oh yeah, same name, and she's freaking out. The halacha is you don't add a name. You know why? Because the Chassam Sofer says for the person himself, what's the peril of doing shidduch? Even if you held of this problem, there'll be a problem with the zivug. But the mother is not in peril, so therefore you don't have to change your name to satisfy a worry of a mother-in-law or a father-in-law. You only would change your name if the chas and kala themselves are concerned. But the question is, when do you change your name? So we know that kol shehuk. Why is this relevant to our Gemara? Because our Gemara says kol shehuchzak Shemoy Be'er Shloshim Yom, then in Chosh Shemoy. They wouldn't be able to change the name if they had a chasna. If they were doing a shidduch and they were adding a name in order that they should avoid the concern that they have with Rabbi Yehuda Chassid, the name has to be changed at least 30 days before the chasna. That's how it got relevant to this Gemara. Okay, everyone should have an awesome, wonderful day. Atzlucha day, and we should hear B'sur's Taivas soon. The hostages should be released. Soldiers don't know how to get in. And so get the Sachen verliehen.
My brother-in-law is Yankov Yosef. My father has